This is the first in a series of videos explaining Walter Benjamin's essay on the concept of history. It is the first in a series that will attempt to make Benjamin relevant for our time, for the year 2025. Angelus Novus by Paul Klee is an odd painting. It is a Bauhaus abstraction painted with purposeful naivete, evoking both primitive art and grammar school stick figure drawings. The work is flat. Both cubist and expressionistic, Angelus Novus almost can't be taken seriously. It's a near cartoon. But it is also the painting that the Frankfurt School Marxist Walter Benjamin purchased with 1,000 Reichmarks in 1921, using the money from a small inheritance to acquire a work that has been called the Mona Lisa of early modernism. Later, in 1940, Benjamin described the painting that now hung in his studio in his essay entitled On the Concept of History.
There is a painting by Klee called Angelus Novus. An angel is depicted there who looks as though he were about to distance himself from something which he is staring at. His eyes are opened wide, his mouth stands open, and his wings are outstretched. The angel of history must look just so. His face is turned towards the past, where we see the appearance of a chain of events. He sees one single catastrophe, which unceasingly piles rubble on top of rubble and hurls it before his feet. He would like to pause for a moment, to awaken the dead, and to piece together what has been smashed. But a storm is blowing from paradise. It has caught itself up in his wings and is so strong that the angel can no longer close them. The storm drives him irresistibly into the future, to which his back is turned, while the rubble heap before him grows sky high. That which we call progress is this storm.
The description is rather famous in certain circles, often repeated, but perhaps little understood. In fact, the essay itself on the concept of history might be little understood. In a recent podcast interview on this channel, Chris Catrone, the self-proclaimed last Marxist, suggested that Benjamin's essay, despite its popularity, despite the wide citations and the mulling over it had received in the 85 years since its composition, a failed bit of writing that Benjamin himself never chose to publish in the form that it is presented to us today. Like Klee's painting, the work is enigmatic, difficult, and often misinterpreted or even distorted. This video aims to read the essay accurately and clarify the Marxist and revolutionary meanings in Benjamin's concept of history. To begin with, I want to simply make some assertions. It is not the case that Benjamin was turning away from Marxism in 1940 in favor of Judaic mysticism. And while the contemporary philosopher Slavoj Žižek has suggested that in today's postmodern world, wherein it is Marxism that is fading and a quasi-religious spirituality that is on the rise through Western Buddhism, political correctness, and other atheistic faiths, we cannot properly understand Benjamin if we allow his ideas to be flipped or reversed.
This window is a simulation of a window. This window, it is not a real window. This window, it is a simulation. There is no one on the other side. I checked. No one cares. See? No one cares. This plant, this is dead. It is a dead plant. This room is full of lies, death, and illusions.
In the introduction to his book, The Puppet and the Dwarf, Žižek wrote, "Today, when the historical materialist analysis is receding, practiced as it were undercover, rarely by its proper name, while the theological dimension is given a new lease on life in the guise of the post-secular messianic turn of deconstruction, the time has come to reverse Walter Benjamin's first thesis on the philosophy of history." Quote, "The puppet called theology is to win all the time. It can easily be a match for anyone if it enlists the service of historical materialism, which today, as we know, is wizened and has to keep out of sight." For a philosopher, Žižek has a wide audience, one that may be discovering Benjamin, historical materialism, and even Marx through him, and so his reversal works through a pseudo-understanding. He refers to Benjamin's metaphor On the Concept of History and uses the metaphor as the title of his book, but we cannot simply breeze past the beginning of Benjamin's essay, nor say, what if the opposite were true? Without understanding Benjamin, we are not in any position to revise his text. So let's begin at the beginning with the first paragraph in the Benjamin essay. Quote, "It is well known that an automaton once existed, which was so constructed that it could counter any move of any chess player with a counter move, and thereby assure itself the victory in the match. A puppet in Turkish attire, water pipe in mouth, sat before the chessboard, which rested on a broad table. Through a system of mirrors, the illusion was created that this table was transparent from all sides. In truth, a hunchbacked dwarf, who was a master chess player, sat inside, controlling the hands of the puppet with strings. One can envision a corresponding object to this apparatus in philosophy. The puppet, called historical materialism, is always supposed to win. It can do this with no further ado against any opponent, so long as it employs the services of theology, which, as everyone knows, is small and ugly and must be kept out of sight." The automaton Benjamin is referring to was called the Mechanical Turk, and was constructed by the Hungarian inventor and author Johann Wolfgang Rieder von Kepelen de Pazmand.
But there is one composer whose name is never included with the greats. Why is it the world never remembered the name of Johann Gambelputti, de von Ausfern, Splendenschlitt, Krasskrenbon, Friedigedangel Barstein von Neckthresher Appelbanger, Horowitz, Tickelenzig, Grandenotti Speltitel, Grandlich, Grundwoldnahe Spelterwasser, Köstlich Imbel Eisenbahnwagen, Guten Abend bitte, einen Nürnberger Bratwürstel, gespürt mit 2 Markelube Hunsfurt, Gumberabe Schonendanke Kalbsfleisch, Mittelraker von Hauptkopf of Ulm.
An early version of Deep Blue, the IBM computer that was designed to play chess and that defeated world chess champion Garry Kasparov in 1997, the automaton was a hoax. It was a magic trick, and it really functioned on the basis that Benjamin described. It toured Europe and the United States intermittently for 84 years, from 1770 to 1854, and is said to have defeated both Napoleon Bonaparte and Benjamin Franklin. But knowing this is not enough for us today. From the vantage point of the 21st century, there are certain assumptions that could be taken for granted in 1940 that require some explanation. For instance, as the stereotypes about the East or Orientalism fade, we may need to be reminded just why the machine was called the Mechanical Turk and not the Mechanical Chessmaster. In the 18th and 19th centuries, and in some circles even through to today, the Orient was thought to be a land of wonder and magic. Calling the automaton a Turk, placing a hookah pipe in his mouth, was intended to bedazzle and mystify audiences. But it also telegraphed to the audience that what they were experiencing was a trick. This wasn't just a machine filled with clockwork, but like a large language model today, it was also a bit of magic. Benjamin imagines that the person inside the machine, the chess master who made the trick possible, is a hunchbacked dwarf. He suggests that this small and ugly person provided the service of theology to historical materialism. But theology, as Benjamin presents it, is in contradiction. He was attempting to both criticize the pretensions to scientific neutrality that historical materialism claimed for itself, that is, that Marxism and its two dominant forms, Stalinism and social democracy, claimed, and to sublate or realize theology as a true and justified force towards socialism. In The Puppet and the Dwarf, Žižek describes the role of religion in a secular world. He claims that religions have served 3 different opposing functions throughout human history. One, religions were the basis of social cohesion. Rather than requiring faith, religions were intrinsic to and entwined with everyday life. People did not have to choose a religion, but were born into them and lived their lives within them. 2. Religions became sets of dogmas and rituals that one chose to participate in and believe in order to align with a faction within society. And 3. Religion became a guide for enlightened or public reason and moral certainty. Žižek divides this post-secular, post-enlightenment form of religion by pointing to 2 iconic representatives of 2 apparently opposed but actually unified approaches, Jacobi and Kant. Kant, according to Žižek, is a religious thinker who universalizes Christian morality through the elaboration of rules or duties. Jacobi was an anti-systemic philosopher of what Žižek refers to as pure internal feelings. For Žižek, Kant and Jacobi aren't to be held apart but brought together. In fact, Žižek claims that Kant can be reduced to Jacobi, as his universalism can be shown to lead to and ultimately be identical with pure inner feelings. However, what we should notice about Žižek's revision of Benjamin is both how he has shifted away from Benjamin's concern with history and also blunted the revolutionary ambition of Benjamin by reframing the Mechanical Turk. Rather than representing a trick pulled on socialists and workers by historical materialism, Žižek is using the puppet and the dwarf to suggest a return to Christianity as a path forward for socialists. The difficulty here is not the advocacy of Christianity, but rather the conflation of political critique with ideological critique. The problem is no longer one about a political project relying upon a trick to maintain its legitimacy as socialist and eventually liberatory, but rather Žižek presents this metaphor as a matter of psychology and subjectivity alone. In this way, Žižek sidesteps the question of history and liberation altogether. Benjamin certainly did not intend to advocate a turn away from historical materialism or revolutionary struggle in his essay, but rather was critiquing really existing historical materialism and attempting to revive the seemingly utopian aim of total social transformation or weak messianism through a seemingly poetic but actually fairly rigorous critique of what had become of Marxism and bourgeois politics both. The hunchbacked dwarf that is the secret behind the magic trick called the Mechanical Turk is hidden away for two reasons. First, he is hidden because the supposed accomplishments of Stalinism and social democracy both amounted to nothing but the accomplishments of capitalism and mass democracy. The progress on offer in 1940 relied upon a willed ignorance, a turning away from what was and what had happened. But the hunchbacked dwarf also represented the spiritual side of the class struggle. He was what remained of human confidence, courage, humor, cunning, and resilience during a period when even communists thought of emancipation in terms of claiming the booty due to a victor.
Well, there we are. Congratulations. Well done.
For Benjamin, theology was to be conceived of in two directions at once, both as an unfounded belief in the forward momentum of society through the empty space of abstract time, an abstract time that is the ultimate product of capitalist, social, and productive relations, and also the insistence on the possibility that a fantastical transformation of society might be actualized. Or as Benjamin put it,
Vulgar Marxism already bears the technocratic traces which would later be found in fascism. Labor, as it is henceforth conceived, is tantamount to the exploitation of nature, which is contrasted to the exploitation of the proletariat with naive self-satisfaction.
what this means is that in a vulgarly Marxist society such as the Soviet Union, the distinction between capitalist and worker is maintained, and this leads to treating workers as natural resources to be exploited, managed, preserved, or used up as is necessary according to the technocrats.
Compared to this positivistic conception, the fantasies which provided so much ammunition for the ridicule of Fourier exhibit a surprisingly healthy sensibility. According to Fourier, a beneficent division of social labor would have the following consequences. 4 moons would illuminate the night sky, ice would be removed from the polar cap, salt water from the sea would no longer taste salty, and wild beasts would enter into the service of human beings.
Benjamin is claiming that the overcoming of the class system, the transformation of society from capitalist to socialist, would materially transform the world at least as much as Fourier imagines. The fantastical visions of the old utopian Fourier are closer to the spirit and meaning of socialism than Stalin's plans and technocratic schemes. On the Concept of History is not a text that explains a trans-historical theory of human consciousness. Nor does it merely point out an ideological impasse that has taken hold of the people. Rather, it is an indictment of Marxism in a moment of still unrecognized defeat. Moreover, it is a speculative treatment of the possibilities still open to us through the recognition and realization of our previous defeats and earlier struggles. On the Concept of History is a complex essay. I've just scratched the surface with this video, which means more explanation is to come.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please do consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons help to make sure that Sublation Media can continue to provide interviews, videos, books, and articles that are critical of the left from the left. If you are tired of remaining stuck within bourgeois ideologies and politics, help us sublate them both.